So I had another project I was working on, but fuck it. Let's talk about Trace, possibly the most divisive character in Pokemon, if not just one of. And seeing as by all appearances he's replaced Blue, that is pretty understandable. When I saw him at E3, I didn't really bat an eye because I had no reason to think this was replacing Blue, and I was more concerned about where he fit into the world of Kanto. But once again, from what we can see, he's the player's neighbor, and there's only 2 houses in Pallet Town. So barring Blue being our second rival, any appearance of Blue will not be as someone we can compete against throughout the game. So let's start with why this was likely changed, and I'll actually lead with my strongest argument. Blue's team in Gold, Silver, and Crystal is reflective of his team in Red, Green, and Blue, but his team in Yellow is almost completely different. Not only does he never evolve his Rattata, or rather catch Eradicate, but he eventually removes his Fearow, so barring his evolution, his final team consists of Sandslash, Alakazam, Exeggutor, Magneton, Cloyster, and Ninetales, 4 Pokemon of which have never again seen the light of day on Blue's team. It could thus be argued that they're not even the same character. Making Trace a character apart from Blue is just taking this idea literally. The first Blue is patient and arguably humble, while the second is the exact opposite, wanting to be the center of attention and taking on the gyms to prove he's the best. Enter Trace, who is seemingly the exact opposite. The second argument for why the change goes back to the fact Chris made her debut in Crystal, and while there is an icon to strongly suggest she was originally intended for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the fact of the matter is she was replaced with Lyra instead of being a slow step-by-step redesign as some have suspected, presumably for this reason. Besides the previous argument, Blue and Green's name makes sense when the player's name is Red and they take place in those games, but in Yellow it makes less sense as there's no reason for their names to be named after colors, and lo and behold, in Let's Go, none of them are. There are also 3, though technically 2, things about Trace's character design that at a second glance and look-see in Pokemon's history are interesting to say the least and may hint at the direction, presumably, Junichi Masuda is taking with Trace. Presumably because Blue doesn't have a big moment like Silver Bari and many other characters that results in character development, at least during the main campaign, Blue instead receives additional battle sprites over the game to show this. The first time you battle him, he's giving a mock salute and smiling smugly. At the SSN, with 2 badges under his belt, he stands with his legs wide apart, a Pokeball in one hand, a fist in the other, and a backpack for carrying Pokeballs and items, showing that he's become a more accomplished trainer, and a more serious one at that. And for the final battle, he's put on entirely different attire. Showing like a prince who has become king, Blue has taken the throne from Lance and ascended to the title of champion. Yellow also conveys the same progress from a laid-back but confident trainer to a more serious and accomplished rival, to the champion who's ready to defend his title against his rival and hurl his first Pokeball. However, for Fire Red and Leaf Green, Junichi Masuda decided to take Blue's confidence and boost it to cockiness from the get-go, which shows he's already taking battling seriously. So then what was the next step to his progression? The exact opposite, apparently. I don't think I have to say anything else about it, but come the title defense, he's finally taking you seriously again. So, beyond trying to pinpoint Trace's almost certain character growth, why am I bringing this up? Well, it's not exactly a striking similarity. Blue's redesign in Heart Gold and Silver seems to take inspiration from various designs. He wears the white shirt from Red, Green, and Blue, the same shoes and necklace from Fire Red and Leaf Green, the jacket from the championship takes on the black from his shirt, and he's ditched the fanny pack that came from Red, Green, and Blue, like he did after becoming champion in those games. With that in mind, when comparing Trace to Blue's new design for the Alola games and the sprite from the SSN until the championship, tell me you don't see the similarities. Unless Trace is supposed to be Blue's son, which would explain why he lives in Blue's house, I put emphasis on the backpack, considering when it came into play. So, the backpack. His similarities to various incarnations of Blue, specifically when he gets to the SSN in you-know-what. The final piece of Trace's design are the shape of his eyes. Stay with me, folks, because I shit you not, this is actually important. Those are not the eyes of May, Brendan, Wally, Bari, Bianca, Serena, Caleb, or Hau. Those are the eyes of Blue, Silver, Sharon, Hugh, and Gladion, and without exception, those 5 have an ego problem. Blue and Silver are self-explanatory, but Team Plasma is a waste of oxygen. Sharon initially wants to become the champion because, in his own words,
if I do that, everyone will admit what a strong trainer I am. That will make me feel truly alive.
Go and knock around those chumps at the Pokemon League. Hugh is probably the most kind example, but when it comes to Team Plasma, he becomes downright violent. And Gladion is just as sullen as Silver and impulsive as Hugh, and all of them without exception have character arcs, even if I think Gladion or Hugh's are derailed or lack the punch to leave a lasting effect. But that's probably another video right there. But this would mean nothing if there wasn't a consistent trend in the games. So, the players have wide eyes that convey their wonder about the world and the adventure that they're about to go on, whether you can see the detail in the picture be damned. Professor Oak has very round eyes with the lines at the bottom, but as you may notice, the corners of his eyes are actually an ovalish round. I'll skip ahead to Misty, whose blue eyes are dazzling and the shape is very round, but if you're counting her eyelashes, they do slant a bit, which, let's be fair, if she plans on calling herself the world-famous beauty, are there for a reason. Lieutenant Surge has very narrow eyes and always has. Originally his grin made him look very pissed off, but as of Yellow and going forward, it shows, much like Blue, that he's full of himself. Even when he's not showing off his teeth, his mouth curves up to show his smugness. If his especially boastful monologue from Yellow, saying it makes it into this game, didn't tip you off. And finally, with 53 more days to go at the time of recording this, we get to Erica. Once again, eyes are very round, minus her left eye, which could be chalked up to it being an edge. Her eyes are half open, and she's not actually looking at you as her attention is more fixated on the pedal, showing that she's kind of in a daze, not fully paying attention as she did just wake up from a peaceful nap in her ornate hedge maze. That being said, maybe this is intentional for another infamous comment that shows how superficial she is. Blah blah blah. Moving on. Contrast with the rocket grunts. Narrow eyes with pointed corners for the guys. Round but partially shut eyes that create jagged corners for the gals. And finally, Jesse and James. Narrow eyes with war pointed corners. Okay, yeah. I see where you're going with this, but it's just pure speculation. Trends aside, it means nothing. If you've got nothing more, I'm done wasting my time here. Fair enough. Talk is cheap, but pictures... they're worth 1,000 words. Thanks to Hajime, check the description for his full video, because all of the trailers and what got shown off at E3 completely hid this from us, and since this has clearly not spread like wildfire, even now with English footage being released on a select few channels, less people are going to know that under the unassuming expression during the majority of battle, minus when he issues an attack, past the fact he gets scared easily, of the frozen cold sweat variety from the looks of it, and in spite of potential concern for the player's well-being, the ego is there, and initially it reminded me of, dare I say it, Hugh. Don't get me wrong, their artwork is like night and day, but a nice guy who backs you up that also gets serious when it comes to battle and has less positive traits underneath their base personality brings a few bells for me. And once again, Junichi Masuda greenlit Bar in Sharon, not to mention the recent tendency for Pokemon characters to have hidden depths. Sorry for small theories about what can be done with traits, because his older sister sure isn't going to be a Gladion. But there are two main routes that they're tied to. Route 1 is where only Trace is forced to join Team Rocket and Nugget Bridge. Theory number 1 is where Trace's most off-putting trait comes into play. The Nugget Bridge is a contest, so this relies on the idea that he goes through all 5 trainers without heading to the Pokemon Center. Trace earns a Nugget after getting congratulated and then is told something along the lines of, I have no way to verify this, but the scene reminds me a lot of the tactics Japanese police supposedly employ while interrogating people. They grab them by the shirt, start screaming in their face in the hopes of making them break down to confess. But who knows how much truth there is in that. That being said, Trace seems like someone that would refuse to join willingly but break down under the pressure of being screamed at by an adult, grabbing him by the neck of his shirt or no. So theory number 1, Trace's arc will be helping the player take down Team Rocket from the inside, and that Trace will simply be playing a role as a member of Team Rocket. Through your teamwork, by the time Giovanni is defeated, Trace has grown more of a spine and appreciation for you. And so, to show his thanks, he and his team are using that as the drive to be worthy opponents and beat you, which is easier said than done. A motivation Junichi Masuda greenlit with Caleb and Serena, so there's a precedent for it. Theory number 2 involves character and gameplay integration. At Nugget Bridge, Blue has a team that is not very plausible to beat Misty's team, even though his name is on the Cerulean statue. It can be assumed that by the time you reach Pewter City, Trace has already defeated Brock, but this could be attributed to the starters having low kick. In Yellow by Nugget Bridge, Blue's team consists of a level 18 Spearow, 15 Rattata, 15 Sandshrew, and his Eevee is at 17. Considering the fact Misty got nerfed by 2 levels, one could expect the same with Trace's team. But even if not, it's just not believable someone with his team, be it Blue or Trace, could win. No, not even with Pika Pow or Buzzy Buzz because of Misty Starmie's 85 base special defense. So, instead he heads north after losing to Misty to train, which is where Trace starts to feel inferior to the player, bit by bit, and starts masking the inferiority with the haughty attitude he shows at the beginning of battles. From my perspective, the friendly rival who can't catch up and grows more and more frustrated until they change something about themselves is played out for Junichi Masuda. A possible twist would be how a bruised ego starts to change the person. Junichi Masuda has gone on record saying that he sees the people who fit the role of rival as either an opposite or someone who thinks differently from the player. By joining Team Rocket, willingly or not, Trace could be pursuing to become stronger by taking a different path from the player. He would go from a genuinely nice guy with an ego problem to letting that ego once bruised make him more and more haughty as a result of overcoming overcompensating to mask his insecurities, to finally coming to terms with those insecurities and trying to change. He wouldn't go back to being a nice guy, but would simply want to apologize for how he was acting towards, supposedly, his best friend after Team Rocket breaks up. Coming to terms with how, for better or worse, Team Rocket has changed him, and now that he's not only abandoned the path, but there's no going back to it, he's going to have to work hard to beat you. Whether this means he'll be waiting for you as the champion, or if it's his cue to get stronger is hard to say. Perhaps he'll be waiting after Victory Road instead? Route number 2, Trace is a successful trainer and continues to get full of himself just like Blue did. So theory number 3, Trace is genuinely the nice guy that he portrays himself to be, but by the time of the SSN, he's growing arrogant. So beating him is just keeping that ego in check, and he sees you as someone to evaluate his progress against. Every loss just shows his team still has room to improve. Theory number 4, Route 3 is correct, but instead of battles keeping his ego in check, Trace loses sight of who he was. After Blue is defeated at the Indigo Plateau, Professor Oak preaches to him that he lost because he had forgotten to treat his Pokemon with love and trust. After you're done barfing, consider the fact that there's very little evidence to suggest this actually has happened, and seems more like a grandfather who's out of touch with how his grandson actually is. Especially because in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, Blue seems to be resentful of Red for beating him, as opposed to in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where he's actually taken his grandfather's words to heart. Blue's bragging about how many Pokemon he caught would actually play a part in training Trace's team, and if he's one step ahead of you, he's battled mostly the same amount of trainers to justify him having a team that could beat the Elite Four. Now get your drinks and popcorn ready to see absolutely none of these predictions come true.